Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive on something pretty major happening in the business world. Singapore is rolling out these new climate disclosure mandates. We're going to unpack what they mean for companies and how they might impact all of us, really. Plus, we'll get into how Richard and his team at 400% can help businesses navigate all these upcoming changes.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see Singapore taking such a strong stance here. They're a major financial hub and kind of setting a precedent globally. This move toward mandatory climate reporting is a signal. Sustainability, it's not optional anymore. It's becoming a core part of doing business.
Like Singapore is kind of firing the starting pistol for a global race toward transparency, huh?
And even if your business isn't actually based in Singapore, these mandates give us a glimpse into the future of reporting. Climate impact, it's becoming as crucial as financial performance. So we're going to get into the details of the phases, all the emissions reporting involved, and the potential impacts. And those impacts could extend far beyond Singapore. Right, let's break down the core announcement first. Mandatory climate-related disclosures are coming for both listed and large non-listed companies in Singapore, starting in fiscal year 2025. It's a big step bringing climate impact right to the heart of business reporting.
And what's really interesting is these reports, they will be tucked away in some sustainability appendix. They'll be issued right alongside a company's financial statements. That really elevates climate impact to the same level as financial performance. Your annual report will include not just profits and losses, but also your environmental footprint.
Exactly. And that's a powerful message to investors and stakeholders. It says that companies can't just treat sustainability as a side project. It's becoming integrated into their core financial DNA.
Okay, let's dive into the specifics. What exactly will companies need to report? I know starting in 2025, the focus is on Scope 1 and 2 emissions. Can you explain those for us?
Absolutely. Scope 1 emissions are the direct emissions from a company's operations. So think about emissions from company vehicles, or if you have a factory, the emissions directly from the manufacturing process. Scope 2 emissions are the indirect emissions from the energy a company buys, basically the emissions from the electricity used to keep the lights on and all the machines running.
Okay, so direct emissions from your own operations
Okay.
and indirect emissions from the energy you use. But then there's also Scope 3 emissions. Those will be added later, right? Those seem a bit more complex.
Yeah, Scope 3 emissions are definitely the trickiest ones. These cover emissions from a company's entire value chain, everything from the materials they source to what happens to their products at the very end of life. Think about a clothing company, for example. Scope 3 includes emissions from the farms growing the cotton, the factories making the fabric, the transportation to stores, and even what happens when those clothes are eventually discarded. It's massive and requires businesses to work closely with all their suppliers and partners.
So it's not just about what happens within a company's own walls. It's the entire life cycle of their products and services. That's a lot for businesses to wrap their heads around.
It is, and this is where Richard and his team at 400% can really help. They specialize in helping SMEs understand these regulations, whether it's figuring out Scope 3 emissions or how to collect and report the necessary data. 400% has the expertise to guide businesses through all of it.
That's good to know because these new regulations are a big change. But are they just about numbers or is there a bigger picture here?
Oh, it's definitely bigger than just the numbers. These disclosures are about transparency and accountability, showing your stakeholders you understand the risks and opportunities of climate change, investors, customers, even employees. It's about taking action.
So it's not just a compliance exercise. It's about building trust and showing that sustainability is part of a company's strategy. But for a lot of businesses, this is a completely new territory. Where do they even begin?
That's where 400% comes in. They don't just help with compliance. They can help you turn this into a strategic advantage. They offer basic and advanced sustainability reporting, and it's all tailored to the specific needs of your business.
Like having a guide through this new landscape, helping you figure out the best path forward. Speaking of charting a course, let's talk about the risks and opportunities. It's not just about emissions, right?
Right. Companies need to think about how climate change might pose risks, like potential supply chain disruptions from extreme weather, or the physical risks to facilities from things like rising sea levels or wildfires.
It's about anticipating those curveballs and being prepared to adapt. But there are also opportunities that come with this transition. A low-carbon economy brings new possibilities.
Exactly. Think about innovation. What new products or services could be more sustainable, meeting the growing demand for eco-friendly solutions? And there are new markets opening up as the world shifts toward a low-carbon future.
So it's about spotting those emerging opportunities and capitalizing on them. It sounds like this whole climate disclosure thing could actually give some companies a competitive edge.
Absolutely. Investors are getting more and more savvy. They're looking beyond traditional financials. They want companies that are managing climate risks and embracing the opportunities. Companies that show that through their reporting, they're the ones who will attract more investment
Yes.
and build stronger relationships.
So sustainability is becoming a key indicator, a sign of a company's long-term viability and resilience. But we can't forget about governance. It's not just what you report, it's how you're managing these issues internally.
Right. Companies need to show they have a solid structure in place to oversee climate-related issues, integrating climate considerations into every level of decision-making.
Walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Having a clear plan and the right people to make it happen. Okay, we've covered what needs to be reported and why, but let's get into the timeline for all of this. It's happening in phases, right?
Yes, starting in fiscal year 2025, all listed companies in Singapore need to report on Scope 1 and 2 emissions. And then from 2026, they'll need to include Scope 3 emissions as well.
And what about the larger non-listed companies? When does it apply to them?
It kicks in for them a little later in fiscal year 2027. Large non-listed companies, those with annual revenue of at least $1 billion and total assets of at least 500 million. They'll need to report on their Scope 1 and 2 emissions. And then Scope 3 reporting and external assurance will be required for both listed and large non-listed companies, likely from fiscal year 2029, but there is some flexibility. If a large non-listed company is a subsidiary of a company that's already reporting under a framework like the ISSB, the International Sustainability Standards Board, they might be exempt.
They're recognizing that some companies are already ahead of the game.
Yeah, exactly. And to help businesses get ready, the Singaporean government's offering a sustainability reporting grant to help cover some of the initial costs of putting those first reports together.
That's good because this whole process can seem kind of overwhelming, especially for smaller companies that might not have dedicated sustainability teams or a lot of resources to throw at it.
And that's where 400% can be such a great partner. Richard and his team are experts at helping SMEs navigate these regulations. They can guide companies through every step, from data collection to reporting, and help develop a sustainability strategy that makes sense for their business goals.
So it's about more than just checking boxes. It's about making sustainability a core part of how a business operates.
Exactly. And it's important to remember, this move toward climate transparency isn't limited to Singapore. It's a global trend. Investors, customers, employees, everyone's demanding more information about how businesses are impacting the environment.
So even if a company isn't in Singapore, they need to be paying attention. This really is the future of business. What would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners today?
I'd say the time to act is now. Companies need to start thinking about how they impact the climate and how they can measure and manage those impacts. The future belongs to companies that are not just profitable, but sustainable and responsible as well.
It's about recognizing that sustainability isn't just a nice to have anymore. It's crucial to long-term success. And if anyone's feeling lost or unsure where to start, don't hesitate to reach out to experts like Richard and his team at 400%. They can help you navigate these changes and maybe even turn this challenge into an opportunity. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Singapore's climate reporting mandate. We'll be back soon with another deep dive.